Good morning, everyone. Thanks for calling in. Yesterday, we had an in-depth discussion of chapter 13 in the book of Numbers. That discussion being about the Hebrews who were sent into the promised land to spy it out, and what that means in relationship to where we are and who we are today. I think that we came to some conclusions and understandings about the wisdom of it all that gave us a clearer vision as to the journey that we're on, and became our guidepost for where we are at this moment. So Ron was facilitating with the assistance of everyone on the phone, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to ask if there are questions from yesterday, and at the same time ask Ron to continue. Thank you.
Questions, anyone? Concerns of yesterday?
Ron, could you ask someone to mute their phone, please?
Yes, please. If anyone has a question, please ask your question. But if not, would everyone else mute their phones, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Ron, I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we go, what chapter did we talk about yesterday? Numbers?
Yeah, we were in Numbers chapter 13. And we are going to pick up there today, and you can go back to 13 if you desire, but we were going to go into chapter 14. But if there's something that you'd like to get it some more information on 13, please feel free. Numbers 13 and 14, okay? And with everyone else, please mute your phones.
Would you check your phones, please, and make sure that they're on mute? Thank you.
I'm not going so that it's several areas. So I'm getting paid for that, right? Yes.
Would you check your phones and make sure that they're on mute, please?
Why am I not getting paid for that? That's
Somewhere.
another job, right?
Give Solomon the wisdom and let him use it. But that needs to be done before I would take you or I would not. Do you understand what you're doing?
Anyone recognize the voice?
I wake up. I'm trying to get the stuff done that I need to get done. You're pushing
I
me
don't.
back.
Do what?
I don't.
Would you mute your phone, please? Thank you.
So I have a question. I don't know if you guys talked about it. Why was it necessary for the land to be spied on?
Okay, it's a very good question, Evelyn, and Pastor started the discussion off of there. So with that on yesterday, so that would be a good place to start again today. Pastor, would you please?
If you look at the in the book of Deuteronomy, you will find that the first chapter in Deuteronomy, it says that the people of the tribe asked Moses to spy the land out. Moses says, "And all of you approached me and said, 'Let us send men ahead of us, and let them spy out the land, and bring word back to us the road on which we should ascend, and the cities to which we should come.'" So, in other words, it was the leaders of the tribes who requested of Moses that the land they sent spies into the land. That answers your question, Evelyn?
Yeah, so how does that deal with what's going on now with our consciousness?
Yesterday when we talked about that, it was simply who investigated ways to become a part of the consciousness. How will we fit into this country after servitude, after slavery? How will we fit into the scheme of things in this country? And the conclusions that were drawn from this search was everything from being, if we are more educated, or if we just know our place and we continue to do the menial labor, or act more like them, then they will accept us. These are the conclusions that were drawn. And spying out the land, it simply means that taking an inventory of the consciousness of the dominant consciousness of this country in order to understand what would it take for us to become a part of it. Does that help you?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and also, Pastor and everyone else, and Evelyn, what you're saying, what helps me in reading, what Ron had recommended, that it talked about the 12 spies, were discouraged. And I think that in terms of us just being able to appreciate the time and season that we live in, sometimes we too may get discouraged, but I think because of these sessions, because of our time together, we, are not the victims, as Pastor said yesterday, but we are the victors. So I think that, it just resonates with me in terms of just seeing, how this particular, story or parable or whatever, that we can see it for ourselves. So, I'm really encouraged about, not being discouraged, but to be empowered. So I just wanted to share that thought. Thank you for that share.
Thank you.
And along with those answers, Evelyn, me, also being an example of what Pastor George had just said, my questioning was not so much of not believing what God said, but not seeing things happen in the timeliness or the way I thought they should happen. And I, in my own way, allowed that to affect me. And that is a part of this as well, spying, not seeing what you want to see and not seeing the way, in your mind or heart that you think things should play out. And that is still a part of it. It kind of, if you allow it, if there is not someone or voice in your corner to say, you're on the right track, or just keep going the way you're going, you can slide a little bit. And that is one of the big lessons to me, is all of this is one voice. If you can picture all of this inside of you, these voices, this turmoil, this confusion, and then there is just one or two voices that says, you know what, you're going to be okay. You are on the right path. You are taking the right direction. Just keep doing what you're doing. Be encouraged. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, everything that's being said is encouraged. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, anyone else, please? We are in Numbers. We discussed chapter 13 on yesterday, and we're going to continue with that and look at chapter 14 today. Okay?
Ron, this is Barbara.
Yes.
One of the things that struck me yesterday that resonated was when Pastor said that when we saw things like, i.e., what we spied out in the land, regardless of what we see, we can make a choice. And if we look at it as a catalyst and not a distractor, a catalyst that propels us forward instead of a distraction that keeps us in fear and pushes us back, it doesn't matter what's in the land. if we see it as a catalyst that propels us forward, knowing who we are, then it's not an issue. It's not a problem for us in terms of our being afraid.
Thank you. You're exactly right. That fits in beautifully. You're exactly right. Okay. Anyone else?
One more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
The milk and honey. Why did they choose to say milk and honey? And what does that represent?
Yeah, because that goes all the way back to what God spoke to them in chapter 6 of Genesis. Pastor, you want to sum that up because you spoke on that yesterday, please.
Oh, when I spoke in reference to that yesterday, I was simply speaking on what I felt that it meant at the moment, and still do. Matter of fact, that is speaking to nourishment, a land that has everything in it that you need for nourishment. From nourishment, honey, milk is something that gives the infant the strength to grow, and honey is a complete food source. You can live off honey for the rest of your life, pure honey. So when it talks about milk and honey, it's speaking to the idea of everything that you need to survive is there for you. So it speaks on to eternal sustenance. Does that help you?
Yes.
Love the questions. Anyone else? Anyone else? And I hope we see how these things apply to us today. Because I think with that explanation, I see Egypt a little clearer, at least part of what my heart has been searching for, and we'll get to that as we get into chapter 14. But anyone else, let's keep this going. If you have any more questions, please.
Did you mention,
Okay.
Pastor, that the milk and honey also speaks to no lack? Because it basically has all of the vitamins, minerals, whatever that you need in terms of nutrition. So it speaks to no lack.
Thank you. You're right.
Okay. I'm going to read a few verses in chapter 14, and we can continue the conversation, okay? Chapter 14 just kind of picks up. This is after the tribes have spoken, and Caleb and Joshua have voiced their opinion that we can take this land. God has given this to us so we can take it. But the other spies have convinced the sons of Israel and all the congregation that this would be a mistake to do this. And the last verse in 13, I think, kind of sums it up. It says, verse 33 in chapter 13 says, there also we saw the Nephilims, the sons of Anak, are part of the Nephilim. And what that is speaking of is if you remember Genesis chapter 6, when it talks about the daughters of men with the angels, or these Nephilims, and I'm pronouncing that PH with an F, hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, that is translated to mean giants, or those who have fallen. So it comes from that episode in chapter 6 of Genesis that where these came from. This is where they have get this from, or where they reside, or they see these people. And we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Was someone trying to say something? Okay. And that's the part that really stood out to me. We became as grasshoppers in our own sight. And that's the part that kind of struck me personally. But anyway, I just want that's what feeds into chapter 14. And so we were in their sight. In other words, you allow that fear to not only overtake you, but it overtakes you to the point where you are now describing what someone else feels like or what someone else sees. You have used your own imagination against yourself, and you see something that is not there. You are creating your own obstacle. Okay. Then all the started in chapter 14. Then all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, the whole congregation to them. Would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we have died in the wilderness? And why is the Lord bringing us into the land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plundered. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? And so they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. Let's stop right there for a minute. That's a mouthful. That's a mouthful right there. And it if you read on further and get in chapter later in the chapter, verse 11, when God and Moses have their conversation, Moses is continually saying to God, you cannot do this thing, you cannot destroy them, because it will look to the Egyptians like this is that you brought them out here and couldn't control them. You could not you could not take them to the promised land. You could not deliver to them what you said it was or would be. So that question came to me. There is something that me anyway that I anyway have not quite understood about Egypt, and I think I see it a little clearer now. But why is it that Egypt is compared to God in the way that it is? Why is it that it needs to be convincing that what God has to offer, what the Elohim or the Creator has to offer, is better than what Egypt has to offer? The first part of this, though, this chapter, is amazing to me. There is a book that you hear me talk about a lot, The Hidden Gospel. I love that book because there's a lot there. I can look at it and turn and look at it next week and get another layer of something he's saying after reading the same chapter. But in looking at his message is getting all your members, getting all those voices, getting all those egos and those thoughts and those concerns and even your voices of confusion, bringing them all under submission, bringing them all together and to be one voice. And the funny thing is, in a negative sense, we don't have a problem with that. We don't have to meditate on that. If you look at this, when we're in fear or in anger, as if the whole congregation is talking about the whole assembly, they have they're in a place of agreement. They're in connection. They have become one in a negative way against the Creator. So if you look at this from a personal perspective, those voices inside of you are looking at it that way, and I think it was Nick who said yesterday, looking at the 12 tribes, all of that is in us. All of that is a part of us. So, look at it from that perspective as we try to make sense of this in what is going on in our day and time. The two things, one is Egypt. The other one is, to me, when I read this, one of the things out is measuring. How do we measure our faith, and what do we call faith, and what is strong to us? Your faith should be your beginning, not your end. And your faith starts because of or something in you or someone who has introduced you to who the Creator is. And from there, it grows in you. But I'm here to tell you that growth, that something starts long before we're born. That's something that is a part of you that is there, that takes root, and you have to nourish it, and you grow to a point where you know the Creator for yourself. For example, if you have someone in your life that you have known, you remember that you knew from a child or from a small or younger age, and you end up marrying that person, you didn't always know that would happen. You grew to a point as you got to know them, and as you talk, you gain experience, and you put that experience away, and that experience grew. And when you needed, whenever you questioned the relationship, you went back to that experience, and you allowed that relationship to grow in you and in both of you as you became one. And then it was no question. It was no longer, do I have a faith in this person? I have become one with this person. I have an intimate relationship. I have built experiences with this person. And that experiences leads to new life. It leads to a new beginning. And that new beginning is a oneness. And it is an absoluteness that nothing or anybody else should be able to break the bond. So what God says in here, how long do I have to do this? How long do I have to keep showing myself to these people? Because your wilderness experience is what I just explained. It is that opportunity for not only for you to get to know the Creator, but get to know who you are, and purging all of those things that stand in between you. Does that make sense at all? Questions or comments before I start talking about Egypt a little bit? Questions or comments?
Yeah, I want to note something in there as well. If you read those chapters, what you see is that, especially in 14, it says that Jehovah says that the only ones who are going into the promised land would be Caleb and Joshua. So even at this point, he knew that he never said that Moses was going in.
Yeah. Huh.
He only said those two.
You're right. I did not I read that, but I didn't pick that up. You want to speak to that a little bit, Pastor?
So he knew what Moses was going to do. It seems as though that Moses was never intended to go into the promised land. I don't see that as a physical event as much as I see it as a spiritual truth. It takes a different type of leadership to bring people to the place of the wilderness than it does to bring them out of the wilderness. The mindset of Moses, the reason Moses was chosen is because he was supposed to take something out of them. In the wilderness, their mentality of bondage, their mentality of inferiority was to be purged from them. And they had to become one with themselves before they would be able to appreciate the awareness of the consciousness that they were about to enter. And it would take a different type of person to do that, a different type of leadership, rather, to do that. And that leadership would be the type of leadership that could deliver them from what they were seeking to leave behind, the attitude of inferiority and the mentality of bondage. And that deliverance came with Joshua. And it appears as though Moses, if he did not see clearly, he had an inkling that was going to happen, because he changed his name to Joshua, which is Yeshua, same name as Jesus, because of the deliverance that was to take place from this wilderness experience of purging. Any questions or comments about that? Does it make sense to you, Ron?
Yes, sir. It does. Questions or comments? Anyone? Anyone who want to add to that?
Good morning, Barbara.
Okay.
Good morning.
I'm sorry.
This is Barbara. It's almost as if Moses had to not be in the picture. Because if you think about what the people had, they had their forefathers, and they thought about, and they always talked about the relationship that their forefathers had with Yahweh. And then there was Moses, and Yahweh spoke directly to Moses, who then spoke to the people. And then in Numbers, when the people started murmuring, Yahweh spoke to more than just Moses, I think. So it's almost like this intercessor on behalf of the people had to not be there over the course of what they experienced through Joshua, Judges, through King, First and Second Kings, etc. Had to not be there for them to be truly open to the fact that your relationship with Creator has to be one-on-one and not through someone else, in a sense. They didn't, Moses was their God. That was their God.
Right.
So when Moses, when they did not see God as, they saw the physical Moses as their God. They didn't see God as although they saw what Yahweh did on their behalf. Moses was the representative of their God. And so for the people, there has to not necessarily be a physical representative, because that person can't be everywhere at the same time. So the people had to get to the point where they saw that their deliverer, the God who saved them, their Savior, was beyond time and place and location, which then said they could access their God anytime they wanted to and directly.
May I add to that, Barbara, something I saw as you were speaking?
Yeah.
As you were speaking, what I saw, I began to see is that Moses and Joshua are more than men. They are concepts of wisdom. And what I mean by that is, if we look at it from the perspective of the enslaved, then the first step that had to take place was for the physical shackles to be removed. And as they were removed, the way of thinking had to be different. And the ones who were instrumental in bringing about this deliverance from the physical shackles were seen as Moses was. They were seen as a God of deliverance. And if we really think about it, That's how Abraham Lincoln was revered by people who had previously been enslaved. That mindset had to change because it was very necessary, as it was for the Hebrews, to look beyond Moses and see that Moses was not Yahweh who delivered them out of Egypt, but an instrument of Yahweh to do that. And within our where we are now, we are just getting to the place where the attitude towards Lincoln is being changed. In other words, we're getting to the place where our eyes are not searching for a deliverer. Our heart, our eye sees the deliverer. And when our eye sees the deliverer, that deliverer is Joshua. All of us are Joshua. Jesus said that if you believe as I believe, not only will you do what I've done, but greater things. But Jesus also intimated that by saying that we are as He is. Therefore, every one of us is a deliverer. And the first who must be delivered from a mindset of bondage and inferiority is you, the individual. Once that is done, then we can exponentially put into the macro this desire of deliverance, and at that point, we began to move people out of a wilderness of bewilderment based upon servitude, inferiority, etc., and get them to a place where they can see beyond the borders of the wilderness and begin to experience a taste of what it means to be out of the wilderness. And once that taste is savored, then we are able to put into the macro the necessary energy to draw people together and help them to see that all of us are one. And at that point, we begin to move for the benefit of each other as opposed to a benefit of self. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When you finish, so what was the promised land?
Consciousness and awareness of who you are.
Okay. Finally know. Okay.
And I just want to add to the promised land. It's a land that is promised because what you have to undertake in order to get there is extremely difficult. But it's like it's like an assurance that if you are willing to undertake what you have to go through to get there, it is guaranteed. That's it.
Okay,
from a religious. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My question alongside of the promised land, then milk and honey is the nourishment of being in the land, the promised land, in the sense of where our awareness?
Milk and honey is whatever it takes for you to sustain yourself during the process of becoming aware of who you are, and it maintains you in that place of awareness.
Okay.
Example, Ron spoke yesterday about how he got pushed out, knocked off his kilter because of something that he saw on TV in terms of the policeman beating this man. Well, the milk and honey is the thing that pulled him back. It is understanding who he is and his purpose for being in this earth. So it is whatever you need at that time that you need it for the purpose of maintaining balance and an awareness of who you are.
Okay. Thanks.
Good discussion. Anyone else? I think it was someone else that was trying to speak when Barbara was finishing. Does anyone else want to leave anybody out?
I just had a thought. This is Audrey, but I wasn't the person trying to speak. So if somebody else wants to go ahead.
This is Barbara. I was the person trying to speak after Barbara spoke. I only wanted to make an observation when Pastor talked, and Ron, you talked the shackles that had to be thrown off, that we had to be rid of. First the physical ones, and then the mental ones, because we can still be enslaved in the minds. What we're talking about now is also freeing people from the religious shackles that have held them and kept them from seeing who they are as well. And so, and I see that as a little bit different from physical shackles of slavery, and then mental shackles of what it means to have been enslaved or to be enslaved. It's like being in jail and being able to free yourself and know who you are beyond the walls of the jail. I see the religious shackle as that. You're literally beyond the walls of the confines of any kind of jail or seclusion or shackle or anything that seeks to keep you trussed up, bound up, and limited in terms of your movement and, or most importantly, your thinking.
Yeah. And if you will, I'm going to read a few more of these verses, and I want to continue down that direction, Barbara and everyone. Is there someone else want to say something though before I go on? Audrey, did you finish? Did you get to say what? Finish your statement?
No. I was just going to say, I always wondered why Moses didn't get to go into the quote unquote promised land, but I see it now. I mean, his task or his mission was what his name means, to draw out.
To draw out, yeah.
His mission was to draw out those Egyptian religiosity in the people. And for as long as it took, 40 years, whatever, that was his mission, to help give people the opportunity to have all that Egyptian religiosity drawn out of them. And so that was his task. So it was Joshua who would lead them on into the promised land, who was savior, redeemer, whatever. But anyway, I get it now.
Yeah, and that is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Ryan. Well, just speaking on that, I just wanted to mention, was there something that Moses didn't do that God wanted him to do in terms of the rock? And I don't know, Pastor Richard, if you can expound upon that, but I just wanted to put that out in the macro. Was there something that Moses disregarded, or something that he didn't do in terms of a rock?
Yeah, he was told to tap the rock with a stick to get water from it, and he struck it as opposed to touching it, tapping it. And that was his disobedience. However, even before that, it was determined that he wasn't going in because of what was said in that verse, in that 14th chapter, about the only two was Caleb and Joshua. I never understood the magnitude. The reason for that tapping the rock thing, because of the disobedience that was expressed by others as well, and they went. So I don't really understand the spiritual wisdom there, because I know that it means far more than someone tapping a rock to get water from it. It's a metaphor for something. I just don't know what it is. And
Well, it's really about obedience. It's really about obedience and rightness, because if you look at what happened with the folk that Moses told, okay, now it's time to go. When Caleb says, okay, let's go and take it, like Moses told us, let's go, we can get this land. The people then started muttering, and then they went to sleep, and then the next day they said, okay, we're ready now. Okay, but the season was over. They did not do it when Yahweh said do it. They did it out of their own from themselves. The unrightness was moving when they themselves wanted to, and the rightness was moving when God wanted them to, which is the difference there. And so Moses was simply to touch the rock as he was directed to, but because he became angry with the people, he struck the rock in anger, I think.
I agree with that, actually. I think this is Nick. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I was feeling as I was remembering that story. It's just somewhat of an infusion of ego into what he'd been told to do. So he was like, the people following me refuse to get it right, and I'm angry about that.
Now that I think about it, the only two who were not disobedient were Caleb and Joshua, because they did exactly what they were told to do.
And I agree with it. I see it. I guess I'm my slight. Go ahead, Pastor. I'm sorry. I thought you were doing.
Sorry, I'm just excited. I think I see something.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because of Moses' anger, he lost sight of Yahweh. He lost sight of his purpose and mission, and his ego pushed him to do something the way that he saw fit, as opposed to the way it should have been done. That is no different than reading the scriptures today and make a decision to talk about he got up early Sunday morning without understanding that it was not Sunday. It seems like a minor thing, but it's major in the adverse effect that it has on people in regards to being obedient, to the extent that you are able to see who you are with the clarity. And those who are in leadership become an example for those who are following, those who are the students of the teacher. And if the teacher becomes the one whose anger causes it to be an example of unrighteousness or disobedience before those students, then it gives them the idea that they can do the same things and still reap the same rewards. No different than what is being taught in religious settings today. You can do anything that you want to do as long as you say, forgive me. You can do anything that you want to do as long as on Sunday you go to church. I think it's the same principle that was at work with Moses, wherein with Caleb and Joshua, in regards to what they were assigned to do, they did it, and they did it well. And they did it, and they stuck to what they saw in the face of adversity. Even though all the people, all the ones who went with them, rather, stood against them and gave an evil report, they stood their ground. And they did what they saw in their hearts was necessary to be done in order for the people to become aware of who they are. And that is where we are now. A group of people who stood in religious settings, raised questions, and were pretty much extricated from those settings because of the questions that were raised, and walked away because did not get answers, continued to search for answers, and those answers brought us into the land of promise, which is a place of awareness of who we are, which means that it gave us a greater burden for the people in that we are supposed to make sure that they see who they are as well. That's what I saw.
Okay.
Thank you for yielding, Ron.
Yes, sir. Questions or comments, anyone? I hope this is making sense.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna read some more of these verses, and we'll continue in our discussion. Okay, I'm just going to the latter part of verse 3 say, "Would it not be better if we returned to Egypt?" So they said one to another, "Let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt." Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces in the presence of the assembly of the congregation of sons of Israel, and Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to the congregation and the sons of Israel, saying, "The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they shall be our prey. The protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Then the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will this people spur me, and how long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their sight?" Okay. And we've covered a lot of this. But I wanna look at Egypt and back up and look at kind of what some of you have already said. I see Egypt as not only being a place of religion. I see it as being duality, and I'll get into that as the upper and lower Egypt, and the duality is very real, and it is very real to this day in the face of religion or anyone seeking awareness. The duality is religion keeps me in a place where I have a home, I have a job, and someone else is responsible for me. I do not have to think. I do not have to see God for myself. I can blame you for it, and you are the one responsible for me. I grumble because I have to pay more taxes, and I grumble because things don't go my way, but I don't want the responsibility. Turning to Elohim is being able to see who you are. It is going into that wilderness experience. It is having the Moses experience where things are drawn out of you. Those things are you seeing who you are, and you're seeing the spirituality that you are, and you coming face to face with that and being accountable to self. And you not only get to know who, quote unquote, God that you've learned about since the beginning of your existence, but you see that God is a personal thing. You see that God is you and that God is me and that God is all around us. And the finding of self is the finding of the universe and everything that exists in it. And there is no separation. So duality is, do I want that or do I want to stay where I'm comfortable? I'm comfortable in being treated like a servant. I'm comfortable in the fact that I know that at the end of the day, I have food to eat. I'm comfortable in the fact that the physical me is satisfied. And as long as I stay in my place, I'm okay with that. So do I want to be free or do I want to live in that confined confusion? So that is to what Egypt represents and what the Creator is saying to you. Look at, since before your being, since before you came into this physical earth, you had a relationship with me. And if you tap into that, you will see that the milk and honey has always been there. There's always been provisions for you. There has always been nourishment. There has always been a place for you to turn. But you choose when things get tight, when things look like, as Nick said, this calls you, it cost you something to take this journey. And the thing that it cost you are the things that you hold dear, the things that you have learned to value and to treasure. Those earthly things that mine are going to be a little different than yours, but they're all the same. They're all materialistic things, or they're surrounded by the god of greed or the god of selfishness. All of those things are what hold us back. So if you're not willing to shed those things, this gets confined to you. It gets a little tight sometimes, and you look back and you say, "Man, wasn't I better off in Egypt? At least I had this and I had that." This has nothing to do with time. It has nothing to do with these people that exist in this time, what languages spoke, what culture. This has to do with your spirituality, which doesn't change. With being a human being, it doesn't change. With seeing yourself as an animal and running by your animal instincts, which does not change. So when we look at this, when you as we have said, Audrey brought up, Moses is drawing all this stuff out of you. And I was saying I see that slightly different in the fact that there is a Moses in all of us. Moses is a characteristic. We could see it. I guess I just don't see it quite, or chose not to see it as an external thing. It is, because it is all of us coming together. But at first, it has to be an internal thing. I mentioned to you what I went through this past week. Let's call that characteristic in me that still hasn't quite died, that still surfaces from time to time. Let's call that part of my being Peter. That part of me still tries to surface in me. It still tries to look at things that don't quite happen the way I want them to happen, in the speed that I want them to happen. It's my lack of understanding. It comes at the time when I'm confused and I want things to happen in a certain way, or I'm tired of the way things are happening. But all of that is part of my internal the thing that's in me that's trying to quiet those voices and trying to bring them as one. And then when I could subdue that and I move to the place where I see that I am the universe and the universe is me, then I see all of us. And all of us become the universe. And all of us are one. And all of us are those quieting voices. And that's when we can help quiet the voices in each other. That's when you pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I'm going through this. I see this." So I look at this, and we're at the place where it talks about them tearing the clothes. That's a place of mourning. They're pleading with God. They're pleading with the people. The wilderness is about a type of death. It's a type of contemplation and a type of internal search and releasing and seeing who you are. And this describes each and every one of us, individually and collectively. Questions or comments?
Just wanted to add one quick thing where you were saying, and as we were talking about milk and honey early, and the milk and honey being what we need. Milk and honey, as you continue on this journey, also changes, because with a lack of understanding, we believe that we need certain things that we actually don't need, and or is already there and already provided, like automatically, so to speak. So the idea of milk and honey, or what milk and honey is, not just from thinking about it, but what that milk and honey actually represent, changes the further we go along.
Thank you, Sheldon. Anyone else?
So I don't know if you're getting to this, but something in verse 44 from chapter 14 I wanted to mention, but if you're coming to that, I can wait.
No, Nick, anymore, we kind of look at these, you know, not necessarily verse by verse, just conceptually. So there's something you see that ties into where we are. Go ahead, please,
sure.
Sir.
So verse 44 in chapter 14, the people who are disobeying are sort of going to, as it says, the highest point in the hill country, though neither the ark nor Moses moved from the camp where the Israelites were. And they were not supposed to do it this way. And verse 45, then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and attacked them and beat them all the way back down to where they were from. And this is the New International Version. But I just wanted to speak about the sort of spiritual metaphor of and the reality of the highest point in the hill country. Because when we're talking about land, as we've been talking about this whole time, it's representing a consciousness that we develop and that we move into. So the hills, or the highest point, are like the most developed, the strongest, most well-defended parts of that land, or in terms of consciousness, the most entrenched, the most sort of difficult to change aspects of that consciousness. So when the people went into that land and charged up the hill, metaphorically speaking, they were defeated because in their, I guess, sort of ego, they assumed that they would be able to approach it in a way that they wanted to approach it. And that immediately resulted in them being defeated. So internally, it's a little bit like all things in due time and in the right way. There are aspects of self that we can feel like we know how to approach or attack in order to change. And doing so at that time and in that way may be completely incorrect, it may result in us feeling defeated and feeling like we took 2 steps back. So these aspects of self may be very powerful, and we can think about them in just in habits that we have formed is another way to think about it. And our habits go very deep within our sort of experience of self. They may be simple things that we can sort of recognize, and if we want to change them more easily. Or they may be extremely deep and sort of rooted to like deep events and experiences that we've had over the course of our lives, and we may not even be sort of consciously aware that we engage in them. And those kinds of things are sort of difficult to approach, and especially if you approach them with your own sort of ego, or you add anger, or you direct sort of anger at it in an egotistical way, like you attempt to fight fire with something that you feel is within you, then you will likely meet resistance and not sort of find a way to change or transform those aspects of self. So it says both Moses and the Ark of the Covenant stayed down, presumably in the valley, and they were not present in that attack, because of that attack, or if that way we think we need to deal with something includes our own sort of egotistical assessment, then that attack does not carry with it the transformational energy of the spiritual source of self. So when we examine all the land within ourselves, through just by being aware of what it is we feel, why we feel it, what we think, why we think it, and all those sort of subtle things we can be aware of within ourselves, the true sort of force of transformation for those aspects of self must include that connection to the spiritual source, represented by the Ark of the Covenant, and then Moses being the leader of the way. So I just wanted to point that out, because as we've talked about a bunch of times, everything about this book, and not just Numbers, especially Numbers actually, but the whole Old Testament, etc., is a map of your internal consciousness landscape. And it is a sort of blueprint of the process we go through in order to transform our own internal landscape, and in so doing, transform our external landscape. So whenever you see things like highest point hill country, immediately connect that to the sort of apex of a particular kind of consciousness, the sort of strongest or highest, best defended, most entrenched kind of consciousness that exists within the context of this this verse, this chapter, and this metaphor. That's it.
And Nicholas, this is Barbara. As you talked about that, I thought about the Tower of Babel, where man wanted to get to the highest point based on his own ego. And that's what I meant earlier also when I said that rightness was moving when God wanted them to move. Because when God wanted them to move, they would have maintained that connection, and the path would have been made for them to move. But they moved in their own unrightness. They moved when they, out of their own ego, wanted to go up the next day. And so I I agree with you with the ark remaining there. It indicates that, okay, you're doing this on your own. The Lord is not with you. You're doing it out of your own ego. So the end product would have been the same, moving to that land. The issue, though, is that they didn't get, if they went up there, they didn't stay because they did it on their own ego. Had they done it when God told them, they would have stayed on the hilltop. Or
Yeah.
at that, they would have attained a higher level of consciousness in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So moving out of your own pride. Well, yeah. Well, that brings up that verse about pride going before the fall. So moving through your own ego and pride means the beat down cometh.
Yep. And
Yep.
I see that as something that happens to us who individually and collectively. And when I say collectively, I'm talking about if we take that and make application of it to the movement of religious dogma, that's exactly what we see. Religion does it on its own way. It interprets the scripture to fit its ego as opposed to allowing it to be a roadmap to show us who we are. And as a result of that, there had to be invented a reward for going to that place or that higher place that Moses wanted to go to. I'm sorry that God wanted them to go to, but if they went on their own, as in religion, now they had to create something that would look like the promised land, and that's something that was created is being in heaven all day long. It's dying, this place of heaven where you're going to see your grandma shaking hands with Jesus. This was created because something had to replace the true essence of what Moses, what the Creator was talking about when he talked about entrance into this place of awareness. So now what happens is religion makes us aware that we are a member of a church or we are in an exclusive group of people who feel as though subconsciously or consciously that they are superior to those who don't go to church. And all of it is based on ego. However, when you step back from that and say to the universe, our desire is for humanity to be at peace with each other. And our desire is to see who we were created to be. It is at that point that ego begins to die and desire takes over. And in that course of desire, we begin to see things in the verses that we read all of our lives. We begin to see things that we never saw before. Why? Because now we are seeing them as we are being guided by the soul, as opposed to seeing them as we have been told to see them by religious dogma. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Pastor, I want to tie a verse in, though, to everything with what you guys have said. Look at verse 25. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites lived in the valley. Turn tomorrow and set out into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. So they were instructed not to do what they did, but they choose to do it anyway. I guess. So then, it almost sounds like, it almost seems like, anyway, they were turned over to a different mindset. They could no longer hear the Creator, or they at that point had decided to disobey or disregard Moses completely.
They did talk about choosing new leadership, remember?
Yeah.
See, and that I think that that speaks to again where we are now. What does it mean when it talks about the people saying, "Let us look among ourselves and choose a leader who would take us back to Egypt"? What is it saying? Let us find somebody who will follow our dictates. Let us find someone who will do what we say, as opposed to someone who will lead us in the way that they see righteousness. Does that make sense, Ron?
It does. And that yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. And that's what happens
No.
today. Because
Yeah.
that's church meetings, that's deacon boards, that's presiding elders, that's Presbyterian councils, all of these bodies who comes together and decide who's going to lead whom and where they're going to lead them to, as opposed to the Scripture guiding, being the guiding force, rather, or the roadmap, as Nick said, for where we are to go spiritually. And I keep making every effort to bring it back to where we are in terms of today, because I do believe that the universe is speaking to us right now, and as it does all the time, but speaking to us right now as we go through these scriptures to show us how this thing has played out in this time period, just as it was playing out during that time period. Suppose for a moment that all of this is metaphorical, and there was no ark in terms of Noah's Ark, and it was a story, or it was a allegory. That all of this is an allegory. Suppose that this story about Moses and Joshua and all the rest of the people there is an allegory to tell us the dangers of following our ego to a place called religion, as opposed to following our soul to a place called truth. Suppose that the reason the name Moses means to draw, and Joshua speaks to deliverance, is that these are codes to veil the truth from the uninitiated, meaning those who are searching for things to enlarge their egos, as opposed to searching for truth to enlarge the awareness of humanity. And what's happening now is the universe is revealing to us, is pulling the cover off of what these allegories are saying. And what we actually can do is properly is say that when we are in a chaotic place as a people, it is necessary for us to ascertain what is creating the chaos and draw that chaos out of the hearts and minds of the people, so that we can move them to a place of being delivered from this animalistic nature at such a time when they from this animalistic nature, so that when they realize who they are, they will understand that they are Elohim who is having a human experience, as opposed to being unaware of being Elohim and acting in an animalistic manner. Suppose that this is what all of this is about. It's an allegory, and these things never took place in a physical sense. Can you see that?
Yeah, I
Hello?
can see that.
Huh?
Yeah, I can see
Now-
that.
Now, this is the thing. I believe that is uncomfortable for us to see that. I believe it's uncomfortable for us to accept that, especially those of us who have been in church all our lives and been the Sunday school teachers and the leadership in those places. To accept that these scriptures are an allegory, especially the Old Testament, especially the first 5 books, are an allegory that speaks to every generation, guiding it if it seeks guidance, guiding it to a place of spiritual awareness, guiding it beyond the boundaries of religion and the servitude of the leadership of religion. Think about this. The only books in the Bible that were not manipulated by Catholicism are the books in the Old Testament. And Christianity and other religions pick and choose what portions of it that they're going to talk about. The New Testament, on the other hand, those books were purposely chosen to weed out those things that are spiritual and so deeply spiritual until they cannot be manipulated. And we are told that all of these things took place in the Old Testament in a human manner, in a physical manner. Yet, we are told in the same breath that everything in the Scriptures are spiritual. And if everything in the Scriptures are spiritual, and Jesus said, how can I speak to you concerning the heavenly things when you don't understand the earthly things? What are they? If I understand that the earthly thing in this regard is that Moses represents a concept or is a concept of drawing out, and Joshua is a concept of deliverance, if I understand that, now I'm beginning to understand the enlightenment. Now I can be shown the heavenly things, or the enlightening things. Why? Because I understand that the earthly allegory is speaking to a spiritual truth. And it's difficult to say that because we have been ingrained with the understanding that these actual events were physical events that took place during the course of time. And when we look at it from all of it being an allegory, not only does Egypt take on a different meaning, everything begins to take on a different meaning. And keeping in mind that those who taught us that these were not allegories are the same ones who use these stories to keep us in bondage, or to keep humanity in bondage, rather, the whole of humanity, inclusive of those who taught. Questions, comments, observations? Well, let me ask you this. What do you think about what I just said?
I can see what you just said. I think seeing them as concepts bring out the real value, the true value, the spiritual value, versus seeing them as something that may have happened in history. that doesn't grow you in any direction. It may improve your intelligence or help you mentally, but it doesn't help you spiritually grow.
And that's what I mean by it being a code. It being the mistress of the gospel, the mistress of this news about our creation, the mistress of our existence, the mistress of the pathway to spirituality. Even when we look at from the first chapter, first verse of Genesis on, those I see as allegories that speaks to a much, much, much deeper truth.
This is Barbara.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Are there no physical stories that are allegorical? If we look at, because what Jesus did was he spoke in parables, and those parables were seemingly things that people could relate to because they saw them, and it was where they were. But buried underneath that was the spiritual, the truth about that particular physical thing that they saw. So were there no allegories in the Old Testament? I'm thinking about when some of the stories speak of the times of the pharaohs and their names, and there's actual artifacts that have been found with those names and things like that. So that's why, are there no physical stories in the Old Testament that are still allegorical in terms of all of the hidden meaning that's within them?
Absolutely. I do believe that those, as you spoke of those artifacts that have been found with the same names in them, I believe that, yes, they did exist. However, as they were written down, I believe that they were enhanced in order to protect the wisdom of to protect us from ourselves. In that you would have to do have a deep commitment to the search of truth in order for you to see what they really mean. So I don't deny that a person named Moses existed. However, I think that a person named Moses and his task was written in such a way that it hid the true story of what was being told. It hid the true journey that led to a understanding of who we are. I guess what I'm saying is that there was a lady named Harriet Tubman who existed and who led people to freedom through Underground Railroad. So what is the truth embedded in that? The truth embedded in that is this lady was far more than a conductor on an Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman was a vessel, a spiritual vessel, a prophet of God. Because of the way she did what she did. She did not do it based upon what people told her. She led them based upon the visions that she had. And she was able to sense danger and in doing so, understand the direction that she was to travel in. However, if we just read it as a historical story, then we miss the reality of the spiritual deliverance that our Creator was making possible for those of us who were being delivered from the Egypt of slavery into the wilderness of the confusion of religion where we are now. Does that make sense, Barbara?
Yeah, now I'm with you. Everything is based in spirit, is what you're saying. All reality has its basis in spiritual things. So, yeah, okay.
Did we throw you off, Ron?
Oh, not at all. I'm loving this. I hope no one is thrown off.
If
The whole
you
chapter
question,
is available, y'all. Huh?
as I said, if someone just raised the question, if they don't see it.
Yeah.
So understanding that everything has its nexus in spiritual, then the question we should always be asking as we read this stuff, even though it sounds like a story or what is the spiritual meaning or underpinning of what this is really, what is the truth of what this is saying?
Absolutely, because I can see, I see the spirituality of everything that has taken place, the cyclical nature of it. Even when you look at what happened after the shackles fell away physically, in our case, in terms of the 1870s during Reconstruction, and here arises a group of people in the wilderness who says we want to know the truth about who we are for the purpose of bringing balance to humanity. And all of a sudden, we get a repeat of the period of Reconstruction, the attitude of Reconstruction, which manifests the same attitude of the slaveholders during Reconstruction in the 1870s, and that is to put people in their place, to keep them disenfranchised, whether it be from the vote or whether it be from health care or whether it be from equal employment, but to keep them in a place of servitude. That the same principles exist. So why would it rear its head now? Because there has been someone has been raised up, or some people have been raised up who are willing to stand in the gap. A type of Adam who is willing to stand in the gap. What does that mean? To a type of Adam who is willing to look at what's taking place with the eyes and seek to understand it by seeing with the eye. Seek to understand it in relationship to the spiritual nature of it, not being limited by the policies and the politics of it, but being expanded by desiring to understand the wisdom of it for the purpose of freeing humanity from its bondage.
And so a type of Joshua and Caleb, if you will.
Yes.
Who, in spite of what the people are saying and the murmurings and what they, who have a vision of what balance and humanity is all about, and who are willing to do it based on what Yahweh says versus the murmurings of the people. In other words, physical kinds of stuff like the marches, they have their part, but they are not going to change things. It is what's done in the spiritual realm that changes things. The invisible moves the visible.
And that is the reason I think that we were shown on yesterday that it was necessary for us to infuse into that march the energy of truth. The desire to bring about wholeness for everyone, as opposed to it being a march who is searching for a legislative victory only. Questions,
Pastor
comments?
Ron, Pastor, is there an opportunity for us to talk a little bit at the end here before we leave about Louisiana and the hurricane, and this being the exact anniversary 16 years later of Katrina, and and the spiritual. And I don't say I don't pretend to know that. I just wanted to see what the teachers see in that before we leave, after you guys get through with Numbers or skip further down, but just before we get off the phone.
Of course, because I see some things there.
Well, let me just say this, then I'll hush. In the last 5 minutes, I think you've summed up this whole lesson from a spiritual perspective for everything we talked about, not only today but in the past. Being able to see it and giving the true value to it is seeing it, everything from that spiritual perspective. That's really where I was trying to go with Egypt. There's something there I don't see all of yet, but it's more spiritual than just knowing the history of it, and there's more value to this book than just knowing the history of it and being able to quote it. So I think that opened up a whole nother door, and I think we don't even see it yet, what that opened up by having that discussion. So with that, I will yield again and let Pastor sum this up and or take it in the direction that Bob has spoke of, or whatever direction you feel to do.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I see when we talk about Egypt, right? Egypt is the corruption of a word that means the hill of Ptah. What is Ptah? Ptah is no different. Speaking the word Ptah is no different than speaking about the universe or our Creator or Ein Sof, the source of everything that lives. And if it's a hill, it's talking about the elevation of the light above all light, the life itself, the one who brings all life into existence, everything that is into existence. That's the elevation of that. This is the place of elevation. This is a place that was chosen in order to be expressive, in order to center everything around elevating the one who brought us to life and recognizing that we are one with it. So if Egypt is that based upon what its original meaning is, its original meaning is, then that meaning does not change regardless of what you call it, and without regard to with regard to what the archaeologists say, it doesn't change anything about it at all, because you cannot change the nature of a spiritual thing at will. So when we talk about the idea of Egypt, we still are talking about a duality, because not only are we talking about the hill of Ptah, the hill of elevation, the hill of enlightenment, the place of the mystery of understanding about who we are and how all of these pyramids, etc., are structured, and the energy forces that are there within those pyramids and in that land of Egypt. But also, the duality there is a freedom in spiritual, but it also speaks to enslavement. And I think Egypt speaks to a greater enslavement than a physical enslavement. The enslavement of the soul by the mind in this earth realm, as opposed to the freedom of the soul and the freedom of the mind. Because when the scripture talks about the renewing of the mind, it's simply talking about the soul renewing the mind or refreshing it and bringing it out of bondage. So to me, when we talk about Egypt, we're talking about that duality. The choice is, are we going to embrace it as a place of enlightenment, or are we going to denounce it as a place of enslavement? That's a choice that we make, and it becomes whatever we desire it to become to us. If we desire it to become the place of enlightenment, then it becomes enlightenment for humanity, and it begins to show us how to bring order to the chaos that we are experiencing. If we decide to embrace it as enslavement, then we begin to continue to see the giants see us as whatever you call them, in the eyes of the giants. We begin to see ourselves only as mere men who are caught up in a cycle of chaos that we have nothing to do with and we cannot bring to an end. Those are the choices that we have. And up to now, we have chosen to see the enslavement of Egypt and thus lived in the enslavement of Egypt and struggled to get beyond the chaos of Egypt. And of course, I'm talking conceptually of Egypt. And now that we are seeing it for what it is, we are freeing ourselves. We are freeing humanity from this cycle of chaos and embracing Egypt as the place of enlightenment, as the place of light itself and life itself. And when Egypt is referenced as the cradle of civilization, it is talking about the hill of Ptah being the cradle of civilization, meaning that the birthplace of all of order that men can ever have, or the greatest order of all can be birthed at this place of Egypt if we choose to see it as a place of enlightenment. And it is in this regard that I see Egypt playing this role in the scriptures that we have been looking at for the last couple of days. And I do see a connection in that between the repeat of Katrina in regards to a lot of other chaotic things. And I will speak to that in a moment if you want me to, and ask if there are questions about what I just said or comments, please.
Yeah, Pastor Richard, I'd just like to make a comment in terms of just what, we have discussed, and then Ron speaking in reference to Numbers chapter 14, verse 6. It talked about Joshua, the son of Nun. And as you spoke about, the Kemetic or the Egyptian understanding of Ptah, it talks about, the divine waters of Nun. And if we come to understand, what that means, I think we're beginning to see it conceptually in terms of just going back to, what the Egyptians taught or the Cushites taught in terms of Khepera. Now, Khepera is the process of beginning. And what I'm trying to do is just look at how the eternal waters or the divine waters, was that beginning where we had all of that substance that was there. It was there. And when you spoke about Ptah, it's that energy that was at rest. And I'm looking at it in terms of spiritually now, where we can begin to see that potential energy at rest connecting with the kinetic energy, which is that energy which is action, when you talk about the Ptah, the hill. And so I think that there's definitely, that aspect of duality that you spoke about earlier when Barbara, mentioned in terms of Ptah, the Mayat, but also looking at Tahuti, which is the wisdom in terms of the masculine and the feminine. So I think that there's some substance that is there, and I believe that, because of, today's thought that Ron had to put it out there to look at Numbers 14, I think we are beginning to see the names of how this is all referring to what we're talking about, in terms of the lesson today. So I really appreciate, what we all are hearing, but I think that divine or eternal waters is that beginning. As you talked about the creation story, you know what I mean? In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. But I think that, again, the substance of the Nun or the eternal waters, I'm just really trying to grasp in my soul, in the depths of my soul. I just wanted to share that thought, Pastor.
When you talk about Nun, when you talk about Ptah, all these things are the creation story. The creation story that we find in the book of Genesis had its origin in Egypt, and it is a recounting of what was learned in Egypt, or what was taught in Egypt about creation itself. The difference is that we are using different terms to identify what's there. It's no different. The story is no different. The story is the same, regardless of how we look at it or what we term it to be in terms of identifying it or labeling it. It's the same principle that is discussed in relationship to Ptah. Ptah is no more than in the beginning. Elohim was created. In the beginning, Ptah, talking about the center of energy. That energy is Elohim. When it talks about the waters of noon, it's talking about and the darkness covered the deep. These are the same stories that are told in different cultures in different ways, but they are exactly the same principle. And regardless of where you go on the face of this earth, when you speak to indigenous people, the same story is recounted. And the recounting of the story may have a different name for Ein Sof or for Ptah or for God or for Elohim or for Yahweh, but the stories are the same. And I don't want anyone to get confused about what the terminology that George and I are using in regards to this. They are exactly the same principles. Does that help you, or George, can you see that?
Yes, I can, and I appreciate the clarity on it and your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, especially about Egypt? Ron, does that help you with Egypt?
Oh, yes, tremendously. Yeah, thank you.
So in everything that we have said and have learned thus far, we're talking about balance being duality becoming embracing the duality and making it one in a sense. Because one shows us the need for or the lack of having the other in a sense.
It's making the two become one.
Yeah.
If you think about duality, if you think about it from a negative perspective, let's say someone is you are a good person, you're a good-hearted person, and you treat everybody with love and respect, but you've never seen or had a bad thought where's your capacity to go and get someone else? How can you have empathy for other people if you've never been there? So it's the turning it into one is when you make the decision and you use it as light to go and get others or to bring others to the place where you are. I hope that helps. I hope that at least that's how I see it. What you're saying.
But we have a situator who has experienced the same things that we have. In other words, our deliverer experienced the same things that we experience. If you are a deliverer, there is something that propels you to be a deliverer, to desire to be free from the chaos. And what is that? Being sick and tired of being in bondage to chaos. So without that, there is nothing to move you to that place. Does that make sense? And then on top of that, when you become that deliverer, when you see that happens, then what happens? You don't want anyone else to live in that chaos either. So that's what propels you to a place of desire to change things. Ron?
Yes, sir. That makes sense. I agree with you. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were waiting on me.
I was. That's okay. I think what Barbara brought up was very interesting. If you are finished with the 14th, Ron? No
yes,
question?
Sir.
Okay. I do think that a lot of people are waiting to hear this, and I do believe, Barbara, that you do have at least a thought about it, in order to mention it. But what I see in that is yesterday was the exact day that the March on Washington took place, and today is the day that Katrina came and a hurricane come exactly the same day. The question is, what happened during the March on Washington the first time? The March on Washington culminated in disappointment. And the disappointment that it culminated in is that there were no major changes instituted as a result of that march. Therefore, a desire was put forth to organize a poor people's march, a march that was inclusive of poor white people, especially out of Appalachia, as well as people of color. And before that march, before the poor people's march could be completely organized, King was killed. And the logistics expert for King was Abernathy. They went on with it, but because the energy that led the march was gone, it did not have the same impact that it was expected to have. And the reason that the energy was removed is because the powers that be was not going to allow poor people to unite against a government that was manipulating it and starving it. So now the march takes place yesterday, and it takes place with a different energy. The energy of the march yesterday was an invisible energy. The energy in King's March was even though at that time I was young, I was there, and the energy there was different. The feeling was different. It was almost like a church feeling when we talk about the Spirit moving on us. That's the type of feeling that was there. However, this was an invisible feeling. It was not the type of energy that was seen there in the last march. The energy at this one was invisible in that it came from a different source. And the source of that march came from a type of Adam who has chosen to stand in the gap between order and chaos and desire to bring mankind to a place of balance so it can enjoy the experience of being a human. And being a human means being Elohim, having a physical experience or having a physical experience. As far as Katrina is, it is yet to be seen. What do I mean? When Katrina came through, the ones who were left behind were people of color, Africans in particular. So let's see how this plays out this time, to see the difference in how the response is to those who are being impacted the most by this hurricane. The Ninth Ward, where the majority of our people live in New Orleans, was greatly impacted. This time, it is not expected to come into New Orleans the way Katrina did. However, it is expected to have a major impact on New Orleans. So let's see if the impact is anything like it was with Katrina. I do not believe that it will be. I do not believe that it will displace the people as did Katrina. I do not believe that it will kill people as did Katrina. I do believe that the saving grace of all of this is the prevailing energy in the earth that's beginning to show itself, or in colloquial language, to flex its muscles in the face of chaos. That's how I see this, what's taking place now. And I do believe that we are going to see other events that parallel what has taken place in the past. So, Barbara,
then would you do what you did yesterday when you infused spiritual energy into the march? Let's do that now, even though the eye of the hurricane is upon the land. It's what happens during and after that's important as well. So taking these two dual energy, two dual types of things, that hurricane and this hurricane, we did not necessarily know what we know today.
Right.
So can you do what you did yesterday, infuse spiritual energy into this one, which should make the difference. As you said, it's already out there in the macro.
And to that I say, so let it be. The energy, our energy, the energy of the type of island that stands in the gap is indeed infused into this hurricane in order for man to see the difference in the two. So that, because what happens is this hurricane had to come. However, when they began, when the talking heads, the pundits began to talk about this hurricane, when they compare it to Katrina, they're going to see a marked difference. And the marked difference that they're going to see is that the damage is different, the impact is totally different, and the reason is because of the energy that's being that has been infused in it from our desires.
Amen.
Thank you. So let it be.
So I'll tell you what else I'm hearing when you say that, because you mentioned Rutherford B. Hayes before and his energy, his returning, and what you're saying then is we're getting the opportunity. History repeats itself, so that enlightenment gets opportunity to bring balance to it. And what I'm hearing is the same way Barbara made this observation, is to be alert and see around you what is taking place, because you have opportunity now to bring balance to more things that may have seemed to be destructive in the past, but that you can correct without the actions of the past to do things or try to get things done. Am I? Are you just? We're not just isolating a couple of things, but this is a universal thing that we're talking about. Correct?
Yes, it is. This is. I do believe that. Of course, it's universal, and I do believe that it's shown to us so that not only will we see the works of our desires, which is an encouragement and which shows us the effects of what we are desiring to do for the benefit of humanity. Also, keep in mind that there has been far more lives exiting bodies due to a pandemic than the hurricane and anything else for that matter. Yet, we have not been guided to infuse an energy into it to abate it at all. And I do believe that the reason is because the mindset of those of the powers that be in government and religion has not yet shifted. And there has to be a retribution. In other words, there's no blood on the doorpost of those whose mindsets have not changed. Therefore, the firstborn dies, meaning that the thing that they cherish the most, the thing that they believe is going to be an inheritance, dies, and then the shift will take place, and then the impact of the pandemic will be abated. Questions,
Okay.
comments, Ron?
No, sir. Thank you.
Did somebody say something?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question. I'm wondering about the greed and racism that was in play when New Orleans was rebuilt, and what this hurricane has to do with that. I think Barbara mentioned it's 16 years to the day, which is the number 7. But I don't know how those things fit together.
I'm saying that what happened, the racism was seen leaving people behind to drown. the racism was seen when the property was being overtaken, and people like Sean Penn went in and put an end to it. It was seen in that people were those who were evacuated were not permitted to come back into the city. And I'm saying that is not going to happen this time. That is the difference. That is the major difference in it.
Got it. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Thank you, everyone. This is Nick. I gotta go. This was good.
Okay.
I look forward to speaking with you all again.
Yes, sir. Enjoy your day.
Thank you. You all too.
Ron, Barbara, anyone, where are we? Let's talk about it.
I think we've had an excellent day. Yeah, I don't have anything right now. I can't wait to hear what you talk about tomorrow.
Take no thought for tomorrow.
No, it's been an excellent day. I hope everyone feels the excitement that I feel from what we got out of this. I love our inclusiveness of, sometimes there are questions, especially on Monday nights, that start the session off and sometimes they're at the end. But everything is on the table. There is nothing that happens as you summed up the lesson today in chapter 14. Everything has a spiritual value, and that's where the questions come in. So when we talk about encouraging questions, it's not only from things we're discussing in the book, but everything is in the book. The book covers everything. As we try to expound on it and see and turn wisdom into words, it's everything. And everything gets its root in its spiritual essence. And so talk, explain things, ask questions, and that's where the joy comes in, and seeing answers and understanding.
Okay, Ron. Are we done?
I think so. Anyone else, questions or comments? Thank you, everyone who spoke. I hope we all got something from it, and hope you have an excellent day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a blessed day, Pat.
Thanks, Ron. Bye, Zoom people.
Bye, family.